that their brands would exhibit social corporate responsibility around the Black Lives Matter movement. Even Chisholm's voice and likeness emerged in media ads as a way to represent Black political independence and aspirations for the achievement of Black women globally. Corporations' attempt to connect with Black women's political and consumer power, whether or not they also sought to grapple with their own transgressions, suggests the conflicts between social justice activism and consumerism. The state violence against Black men and women and the public support for Black Lives Matter during the spring of 2020 brought together an unprecedented, multiracial, and intergenerational global coalition of people who protested against the state and imperial project on everything from defunding the police to climate change, affordable housing, and workers' rights. At the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, the emergence of book clubs, workshops, reading lists, and podcasts reflected a renewed interest in an untold national history, as well as how to reckon with racism and white supremacy. Academic institutions, political organizations, and corporate boards were forced to review themselves internally and externally around diversity. Very quickly, discourses around race, African American history, and critical race theory, along with public efforts to unlearn white supremacy and become anti-racist, were met with opposition by those on the right. Yet these efforts would be short-lived because of the failed insurrection that occurred on January 6, 2021. In an effort to pivot from their losses, the GOP executed a previous playbook tactic to both distract and capitalize on their followers' angst. They began rallying against a woke campaign and fabricated culture wars that sought power over PTAs, school boards, and state administrations. Books and materials that had once been accessible were now being banned across the country. In this moment, despite Chisholm's historical significance, her critique of white supremacy, sexism, and colonialism, and her support of Black studies would firmly place her and the book she wrote on the banned list in states like Florida, where she resided until her death. Additionally, the current attacks on Black studies by the right would have been opposed by Chisholm, who advocated for Black studies inclusion in elementary and secondary education. She wrote extensively about the importance of Black studies as both an intellectual enterprise and a prescriptive responsibility for Black students to utilize the knowledge gained from the field that was beneficial to Black communities. When I first began to work on Chisholm 17 years ago, I did so using an approach to Black women's history that Deborah Gray White identifies as mining the forgotten. It quickly became evident that significant silences in the scholarship had minimized her role and that of other Black women within American political history. The frequent mining, excavating, and recycling of various accounts of Chisholm's life, rather than allowing her and her archive to establish what she said and believed, have resulted in the creation of an alternative narrative that is far from her own making. Yet the most salient engagement with Chisholm and her politics is through her own writings, speeches, and position papers. I found it essential and valuable that Chisholm speak in her own words and possibly on her own terms. This book, Shirley Chisholm in Her Own Words, allows her profound words to provide insight into America's conservative policies, the all-pervasive sexism in politics and society, and the siege on Black and brown people in the U.S. and around the globe. It also holds up a model for a new cadre of political leaders, illuminating the ways Chisholm dared to be herself through words and actions. Shirley Chisholm in Her Own Words is the first collection of Chisholm's intellectual works. Her writings, speeches, and position papers